what would you say in those early days? Like you said, church was mostly home. Tell me about that home in the early stages.
Yeah, like I said before, I grew up in a very conservative Caribbean Christian family. So you can only imagine. I don't think church is where I feel most at home.
I want to talk to you about some of those limitations and restrictions and try to find the best word to use when it comes to church culture.
First, I'll say that the church has been, I'm so grateful for my experience, just like you are. Growing up in the church, I wouldn't be where I am without it. I do think, though,
Became take your shit and get out my house. It was difficult. I remember saying that when I become Oprah, when I get emotional about that, but when God's purpose in my life shows up and shines bright, don't tell anybody. You tell me about how, although you had a stable home and you had a stable church, you felt those limitations and then you withdraw. Give me more insight into that. I left McDonald's going, I would never be a goddamn social worker. Just because focus on the details, God knows the direction.
That's some deep.
because that was like the spirit of home for me.
Hi, everyone, and welcome back to this episode of How Do You Divine? And on this episode, we will explore how we have come to define home. And what does home look like to you? I'd like to welcome Ben Jeanty, founder and host of the I Came Home to Heal podcast. Ben, thank you for being here. This is amazing, and I'm so glad to have you here because when I heard the name of your podcast, it sinks deep. It sinks really deep. I came home to heal. So tell me about early days of how you define what was home before you came to heal.
Whoa. Yeah. So first, thank you for having me again. This is amazing. Glad to be here. Home before I did the work looked like my little space, my room in Mount Clear, New Jersey, my childhood home. That was like my sanctuary. That was like the place that I withdrew to when I felt overwhelmed or excited or nervous or anxious. Like that was home.
Yeah, your room. Well, sounds like you're fortunate enough to be a child that had his own room. So let's start there. The privileges. So you know what I mean? It's so great. So tell me about your early days. Where are you from? Tell me how we came to know Ben.
Yeah. So Ben is a Haitian kid born and raised in northern New Jersey. Yeah, super conservative, super Caribbean Christian family. Yeah. So in Haiti, well, in Creole, we like to call, we have this thing called l'église la caille. It's basically you're either at home, you're at church, or you're at school. So if I wasn't at home, I was at church or I was at school. And that's really what defined my childhood.
Nice. So would you say you were one of those kids that was in church all weekends, or like, you know, you went to school and
Every
then
day
you
of
went
the
to every day?
Every week. 6 out of 7 days of the week, if not 7. Yeah.
So would you consider yourself a PK? Because I always feel like parents that are heavily in the church, you don't necessarily have to be the pastor to have like the PK
That's good.
treatment. You know, the
Yeah.
deacon and the head of the choir. You know, everyone has that PK experience. So would you say that you're a PK?
Definitely.
Nice.
Because the pastor of my childhood church was my uncle.
So you technically
We were always together. We were always together. So
Yes, that is nice. So what would you say in those early days, right? I feel like as children, because I too, so let me first say, I too was, I call it weekend, all weekend. We couldn't do during the week.
Yeah.
So I came to New York when I was 4 years old. I originally was born in Jamaica. My mom came here before we were really young, and then brought my brother and I when we were 4 and decided to migrate here. But my father is one of 11. Very big family. My mother's the oldest of 8. So it was very clear from there on that, you know, our culture and who we are is, and where we come from is part of who we are. So it was every summer back in Jamaica.
Yeah.
Listen, if school ends Thursday by Friday, I'm on here in Jamaica. People have look up free champagne at 6:30 years old. Like, it's free. Take a look up. Like, so we was one of those kids that, you know, traveled alone. So we with the stewardess the whole time. So every single summer we were back in Jamaica. So, and I actually started high school in Jamaica as well. Yes, because my whole story, but academics is a big deal. And I started high school in Jamaica. So I always say not my culture, it's who I am. So I love that you said that 6 days out of the week you was in church, because I didn't get 6 days out of the week, but my mother's side of the family is Baptist Christian. My father is 7-day Adventist. So when I say I went to church all weekend, I went to church all weekend. So from Friday night when I was with my maternal grandmother, and I'm a grandmother's baby. My grandmother is really nurtured, and I always say I would not be who I am. Funny enough, both their names start with L. Oh, Sister Lara and Galiate Cara Lurleen. So Friday nights, I would be with my paternal grandmother. You know, it's Seventh-day Adventist. As the sun goes down Friday, it's worship time. TV off, no books, no nothing. It's worship time. Then we went to church on Saturday. Come back, I have lunch after church, big lunch, yeah. And then I hang out for a little bit, and then my uncle would come get me after going to church with my maternal grandma come Sunday morning. Yes. So it was church all weekend.
Église, church, Lakai, home.
Nice. I love that trifecta. So of the three, where did you most resonate with home?
I think church is where I spent most of my time. And I think because it's where I saw my friends, it's where I hung out the most with people that I interface with. So yeah, definitely church.
Nice.
Yeah.
So how did the definition of home change, right? I think we grow up, we start going to school, we start to see, people that were raised with different value systems and things like that. And I always say it's not better, it's different. You know what I mean? Because to me, God calls us in very unique ways. And just because I know God, because I had the benefit of being raised in a household that was very intentional about it, doesn't mean that people that didn't have that same level of intentionality don't know God either. You know what I mean? So where would you say, like you said, church was mostly home. Tell me about that home in the early stages, from being a young boy to middle school to high school and then an adult. Like, I'm sure that environment changed in many ways.
Definitely. Yeah, like I said before, I grew up in a very, very conservative Caribbean Christian family. And so you can only imagine like what that looked like. But yeah, we were super Baptist, super conservative. But I saw my uncle and his siblings serve and support other people through church. And I learned hospitality. I observed that, but I also learned it myself. So like that was home to me. Home was like hosting people. Home was serving others. Home was doing the Lord's work. I still cherish that to this day. I think it evolved over time though. Like I said, when I was a kid, like that's what I saw, that's what I lived. But I think when I turned like 17, 18, I started to realize that I didn't agree with everything that was done in the church, right? I didn't necessarily, or even before that, like there was a lot of dissonance that I experienced. Quite honestly, I was like 11, 12, 13. And then things that I learned about my childhood that I was like, wait, what is that about? And like, what is this? And who is that? And like, what do you mean? And that's not in alignment with what we say we practice, right? So that dissonance is what I was like, I don't think church is where I feel most at home. I'm going to feel more at home by myself. So I started to retreat even at like 13, 14 to my room. And that's where I found the most solitude and sanctuary. So yeah, like I kind of stayed to myself for a long time.
Nice. Would you say that you were a loner?
Yeah.
And that's an interesting take, that you went from being part of such a big community in the church and then you retreated into being alone. And there are two things I want to touch on with that. But before we touch on that, I want to talk to you about some of those limitations and restrictions and trying to find the best word to use when it comes to church culture, right? I think church culture can be that heavy sigh says a lot. Church culture to me, as someone who, like I said, I had the best of both worlds, right? I was in church all weekend and both my grandmother serves, my grandfather served, like my mother is now deep in church. Like I understand the organization of church. I understand the community of church, but I also understand the complexity of people, right? And I know that they're not all one and the same. And sometimes people use church to hide and mask, right? It's easy to hide behind something, right? But I always say God don't dwell in mess. So it's very clear to me when it's not one thing than the other. But how was the limitations? I'm just going to use that word of church. How did that play a part on your mental and emotional well-being? Because I personally, it made me sharper. I can speak for myself. It made me a lot sharper about not who people said they were, but how they showed up. And it, in a way, taught me how to navigate
humans, right? Because you can mean well, but we are all human. You know what I mean? And I think being a part of the kingdom of God, right, and the church gives us this false sense of authority and qualification that I think people often use based on their objective. Yes. So talk to me about some of those limitations.
Yeah, so first I'll say that the church has been, like, I'm so grateful for my experience, just like you are. You know, growing up in the church, I wouldn't be where I am without it. That foundation is super, super important. I do think, though, you know, being a PK and seeing behind the veil of things, there were some challenges. There were some things that I saw that I asked about, questions that I had that weren't answered. And I think as a 11, 12, 13-year-old kid, you don't have the skills that you need.
All the verbiage.
Right. To really articulate yourself, or to, I think, reason with a bit more patience. And I think those challenges, when those questions weren't answered, or quite honestly, people didn't have the skills or didn't have the language themselves, the people that we're submitting ourselves to, right?
They are still just human.
Right. They didn't have the language, you know? So I think that was a huge limitation. Like, if I didn't feel safe at church, where like we're talking about meeting God and like submitting and surrendering ourselves, right? But like the pastor who's leading our church is also family, who I still don't feel safe enough to talk to or safe enough to share with. There's a dichotomy, a dissonance there.
Yeah,
so.
and there's a limitation and an aspect of safety that, for me, I always say, especially for my kids, when it comes to church or any environment, I like to keep it simple, because I know as human beings, we don't all have the same level of emotional intelligence or communication skills. So I always say, I just want to be comfortable. If there is comfort here, then it's something that I can start to proceed in. But same thing for my kids, because they go to church now. We've changed church homes a few times just because I like to have church homes plural. I don't like to have a singular church home.
When did that become a thing for you?
So in Jamaica, I had church homes, staples, right? And when we came here to New York, my mother had various church homes for periods of time. So when I was in elementary school, it was these two church, and then we went from this church, and then there's another church, and then we just always, because in Brooklyn, being a child, like you said, I never knew the why or how behind why we're going to this church versus that church. But I made a friend, and I never knew the whys behind the transitions. But I did see the differences. You know, I saw the differences in how people communicated with each other, how they engage with my mom, how they engage with my brothers and I, my brother and sister and I saw the differences. And I noticed for myself that once there was a sense of familiarity and comfort, I see, you see where I'm going, that more of who they really are started to unravel. And I'm very intentional about purpose. Like, if I'm going to spend my time doing anything, I have a tangible outcome from it. So when I go to church, I'm going for fellowship and I'm going to be close to God.
Good.
Those are my two tangible outcomes. Honestly, nothing else. What made you sigh on those?
It's so real and so honest. I think that the needs that we have when we're talking about fellowship or church vary, right? They're not all the same. But I think that this generation of church leaders is probably ill-equipped to really hear that truth and minister to those needs effectively, I think. At least it's been my experience. It's like, our Sunday experience should be this. You should be coming for this one thing. If not, you don't belong, almost, you know? So yeah, thank you for sharing that.
And also in that familiarity, I noticed that their requirements became church. You have to have on a skirt. You have to wear this. You have to do this. You have to come at this time. You have to park this way. So that's why I like homes. I like to hop. I want to be a guest at all times. You know what's so funny? When you said, like, your pastor, right now, if I'm honest, my primary pastor is Stephen. I love him so much.
Yeah, I get it.
I love him so much.
This is amazing.
And I hear his word more frequently than anyone else. My algorithm on my YouTube gives me his 15-minute word every single day. And it is part of my every single day. I'm just like Stephen Fornick in the morning. After my personal devotion, I'm like Stephen Fornick as I get dressed. Because I think he gets it. I think he gets, and again, I've never stepped foot in his church. I've never gone to, I think he's in the Carolinas, in South Carolina. Yeah, North Carolina. Never been there. But I understand. I love that he gets it in a sense where people are looking to stay close to God. People are looking for words to keep them in alignment. And all the rest is just the rest. And I think in church homes, sometimes the rest becomes the church.
Yeah.
But no, I love this. I love what we're talking about. And I want us to go back into church home and then transition to like how church home wasn't safe. Then you entered into your room, and then we're going to talk about your career aspirations. Like, what do you do? Like, who was Ben? And how did that transition? Like that full circle moment. You see what I'm saying? I love that we're talking about home and the variations of church home.
Home was the word.
Oh, it's home was the word. See, I'm telling you, Gabe comes in clutch at all times.
No, home was the word, because I think people are always searching for somewhere. For me, especially, I always say my early years of childhood was with diversity, chaos. That's what I call it. And what I've come to learn, especially in the Caribbean community, chaos is taught frequency. So
It's definitely the norm.
it's like the frequency you feel most comfortable
Mm-hmm.
in especially certain generations.
Yeah.
Chaos is, and even as a young child, it made me uncomfortable.
And that's why I withdrew. Like, I would sense that. I would like, this is too much. I'm withdrawing. You know, like, y'all figure it out, you know?
You see, that's good. Whereas, see, I'm the oldest girl, so you already know.
You carry the weight.
Exactly. I'm the oldest girl, and it's 4 of us. My mother had 4 kids. My father, she had me, my older brother, her first husband, and second husband is my little brother, my little sister. And for a large portion of my life as a child, I always felt like the adult in the room. And it was so taxing as a kid. Like, so always being the one to be like, okay, now, can we move on? Can we stop this? Can we eat? Can we just not do this anymore? You know what I mean? So stability and security and things like that, when you say home, really hits hard for me, because I always feel like I lived on my own since I was 17 years old. I needed peace. Very early on, I found that peace is necessary for me to exist.
Wow. What made you choose your peace at 17?
It wasn't chosen for me. It was a situation where I've always been really good at school. So I've always had like straight A's, always kind of killing it. And the older I got, my home life got more chaotic, to be honest. And I was responsible for the well-being of my little brothers and my little sisters. From the moment they woke up to the moment they went to bed. Pick them up, drop them off, homework, dinner. I was responsible for that. And as obviously I got older and I'm trying to graduate high school, I needed money. And that wasn't, there wasn't an allowance. That's why I joke with my kids now. There wasn't an allowance. So I got a job. My first job I got, it was 15. I was a babysitter. So from that, I just kept getting jobs and working. And obviously that makes little time for me to take care of my little brothers and sisters. So that created a lot of conflict, a lot of contention. And throughout the years, I just kept picking me. I'm like, I need money. I need to be able to do it. So it was like a slow burn. And then I started a job in the city out here. So I had to start taking the bus really late. And I used to show up to my first period class and basically go to sleep, because I still needed to wake up at 5 a.m. to get my little brother and sister out. So it's not like sleeping in was not a thing. You know what I mean? So I got them up and got them out. But as soon as I hit first period, I was sleeping. And as a result, I failed my first period class. And my counselors and everyone was like, basically, Sliga, this is not you. What is happening? And in Caribbean culture, as you know, there's a lot of pride. These deep breaths that you keep taking is killing me.
Those are like bedrocks of our community, you know?
Yeah. The pillars to me that hold up nonsense. So obviously, due to pride, I didn't share all what was going on, and then I'm working and then running here. I just was like, I have a lot going on. And then, some people bought it. The other people who, when I went to school, like the real mamas of school, like my counselors and stuff, like, no, Sanika, we're not taking that. So you know what? Now you got to go to night school. You either go to night school or you don't graduate. That hit me like a ton of bricks. Not me. Maybe I know the books, know the work. You're not about to. Her?
Right.
She?
Right.
It left back. What?
That's their prize.
Super senior.
Right.
Ooh.
Right.
So I was like, oh, no. I'm going to night school. So going back to me already limiting my availability to be the primary caregivers to my sisters, I had to limit it more. And that night was the night things exploded when I had to go to night school, when I was just like, both his parents was in the house. And I said, he's down the street. I have to go 2 buses away to night school. I will not pick him up. You have to get up. Holly bad word, the cussing. If you dare not pick him up, you know how, a Caribbean lover, a threat. Listen, if you not pick him up, nobody come back in here. And in my mind, again, I'm not being a super senior. So I went to night school. Longest ride back home ever. The 2 bus rides. And funny enough, that night, I actually got a ride from one of my friends' friends from night school. Because again, I lived in Flatbush. It was in Canarsie. So it was literally like 2 buses away. And I remember taking like a huge deep breath before I went back in the house. Ooh, I'm getting chills. It makes me, that's how traumatic it was. And long story short, because I don't even want to go into details and get emotional, it became, take your shit and get out of my house, because I went to night school. It was difficult. It wasn't like, again, that home was comfortable, safe, stable. It wasn't none of those things, but it was still a home that I knew, And at the time it was, wow. And I remember, it's funny, I remember saying that when I become Oprah, when I get emotional about that, but when God's purpose in my life shows up and shines bright, don't tell anybody that you were part of that. And it's the reality of what happened. And that's how I ended up being 17, living on my own. So when you say home, it means so many different things to so many different people. Because some of us don't come from the traditional home. Thanks, Gabe. You're the best. And sometimes that's why I'm such a happy nerd, because I say only knowledge and the pursuit of learning teaches you that your environment is not the only environment. That the home you know is not the only home you can create. So you tell me about how, although you had, a stable home, and you had a stable church, you felt those limitations, and then you withdraw. Give me more insight into that.
Yeah, so I've never publicly shared this story, so I'm gonna do so now. When I was going, coming back home from church. I was getting a ride from the deaconess at my church, and we got in the car. Me and my older sister were getting in the car, and she was like, "Hey, did you say hi to your sister?" I was like, "No, what are you talking about?" And she was like, "Yeah, that's your brother's sister." I was like, "What? What do you mean?" And she was like, your brother Joshua, that's his sister." I was like, "I don't know who you're talking about." And she was like, "Then stop playing, like, respect me, like, go say hi." I was like, "I don't know who you're talking about." She's like, "You really don't know?" I said, "I have no idea what you're talking about." It's like, "Oh my God, like, please don't say that I told you." And that's how I found out that my father had another child. And like, I went home kept it to myself because at the time, the deaconess was renting from my father. And so she was like super worried that if news broke out that she was the one that told us, you know? And so I felt the need to protect her. For sure. And so at 10 or 11, like, I don't know what to do with that tension. Like, I have no business knowing that.
Knowing
right?
or holding that in that space.
So I just kept it to myself for a few weeks. And then I asked my mom. She didn't have the answers. I asked my dad, who kind of dodged the question. Instead of answering directly, I think he was like, who told you? What do you know? Like,
Where the curiosity is coming from.
And I was like, you know what? I'm just going to withdraw. This is too much. I'm just going to withdraw. So that's kind of where it started. And as I grew and as I matured, I realized like all the things that, like not all the things, but there were things that we taught in church. What I will say is that I learned to lie at home. Like that is where I think we learn to lie.
And this has to be very true.
Yeah. I learned to lie at home. I saw how instead of speaking the truth or sharing the truth, people were defending my father or like not sharing the truth and I'm masking, like literally hiding it, you know? So I was like, you know what? This is really interesting. So as I lived my life, when I look back on my life, I realized like that's when I started to learn to lie.
What's interesting, especially in the Caribbean community, I don't think we see it that way because of the bride. Yeah. It's like, it's not lying, it's holding a legacy.
It's up to protection.
I'm sorry you had to hold something so heavy as a child. You know what I mean? That is heavy and complex. Because then you have to question everything.
Everything. Well, if you could lie to me about a brother that I might be having, what do you, like, you know? What else is not true? So I think at 10 or 11, I start spiraling. I question everything. Well, if that is not true, then like, or if this could be true, then what else could, you know? So that mental gymnastics is too much for a kid.
And how did that change home? So now both homes start looking different, right?
Absolutely.
Both church home and your actual home you reside. How did that now change the frequency home?
Yeah, so I think that shaped my entire adolescent experience. Like that interaction, that quest for truth and being told like, yeah, no, you're not ready to know, or like, it's too much, you know, I don't want to tell you. Like that shaped everything about the way that I saw church, the way that I saw home, the way that I saw safety. I no longer felt safe at home, like at my childhood home. And I also felt like, I think that set me on a quest for God too, in a different way. And I learned 15, 16, 17, 18, there was more to God than just this Haitian Baptist denomination that I was, you know, accustomed to, grew up in. And I wanted to explore that. I wanted to get to know God in all the ways that God existed or showed up, not just the way that I was taught I should conform to. So
that's interesting. How did that add ripples to your aspirations, right? So tell me more about when you pursued high school, your career. How did that add it? Because I always say that in the Caribbean culture, we don't understand how secrets matter to people's journey. And as people of color, there's enough ripples in the world. But then we have this extra layer, extra task of a ripple. So how did that ripple impact your high school, college, your career now?
So I think as a PK, going back a little bit, my father was one of 7. My mom is with as well. It's a big family, and my mother was the first and we were the oldest sister. Sent her to the U.S. and so she was always supporting her running back home. So I kind of think I learned not just to love, but to save people very, very early on. Loving people is hard, serving people is hard, saving people you can't do. So I think that savior complex led me to social work initially. I wanted to be a counselor. I wanted to help people navigate the terrains that I was navigating. But I realized I didn't want to do that anymore. I realized I didn't feel like that was what God had called me to do. I feel like I was doing that because it was what people wanted from me, but not necessarily what I wanted from me.
counselor. You would navigate you into the ways that they want to go. Would you say that like social? It's funny. I want to be a social worker in high school. Yeah, I did, and I tell a story now about during when I went to school, they quote unquote spark, where it would allow kids that just wasn't having a good day.
Heard about that program.
Yes, spark was very important to me in high school. It was very Miss McLean and oh my God, I'm getting the name, but the two counselors in there were pivotal to my well-being during high school. And I just knew that was safe space. That room, I could go and breathe and, just society. And I told her, I want to be a social worker. I want to help people. I think there's a lot of people going things that they were for cheap or circumstances of, and I want to help them navigate that same thing. Now, I'll never forget, right at Samuel J. Tilden High School, she had a friend who was a social worker who worked in the New York City's child CPS. CPS? Is it CPS? Is that what it's calling it? CPS. That worked in CPS. And she said to me, I think you're so bright. She was like, all that you go through, you just so bright. I never forget. She just kept saying, you're so bright, and I want you to know what you're aspiring to. And I don't want to tell you what to do or what not to do. So she's like, I'm going to have my friend come to school. Keep in mind, friend was going to repeat the big dollars. So I hate that I forgot her name, but I remember the conversation we had. And she told me about her dates. Because that's what I've always been a questioner, and I want insight. I want your butt. And I will never forget. She told me about her days, and it just felt so heavy. And she's like, we will love people like you. But if you don't know how to shut it off, it will kill you. She looked me in my pupils and I left McDonald's going, I would never be a goddamn social worker. I left McDonald's like, guess not. Guess not. Just because her experiences, because she loved her talk. Yeah. So when somebody is telling you something with all the things, and I'm receiving it. So I love that parallel that we have. So that was your aspiration in high school or college? Or high school. So what happened post-high school?
So post-high school, I started studying at Rutgers University. Got a full ride.
Nice. Not on this stage. Okay. Out to Rutgers on a full scholarship. Excuse me, Ben. Don't play small. What's going to happen every time you come here is you will get your flowers, okay? You went to Rutgers on a full ride scholarship. Tell us about it.
So I started with a full ride.
But no, don't do that because you're human. Hey, you still achieved that just is given out in our community. You just go to Rutgers on a flight. Come on, you did that.
Yeah.
Congratulations.
Listen,
You did. Come on,
But 3 semesters and I realized I don't know if school is for me. I don't know if school is for me right now. I just need some more time to process. So I started working for Smashburger, and it's a burger joint, probably heard of it. They opened up their flagship store for the East Coast in Mount Clair, but not town. So I started working as a dishwasher, and then maybe 6 months got promoted to shift manager.
Okay. So not 6 months, becoming the boss. I was like, I'm not sure if the books is for me. Let me go wash dishes. Right? But I feel like that humility, and I talked about it on so many different podcasts, because in society, we don't want to look like we're trying. We don't want to look like we're failing. We want to look like we got it together. Everybody's ready to go on the next trip. And I think it's important to highlight, you got a full ride to Rutgers University. Did 3 good semesters and was like, I don't think this is me. And you trusted yourself. You trusted yourself to go, I'm going to go wash dishes at Smashburger. Yeah. Tell me about that.
My dad was not having it. So my dad, interestingly enough, before I wanted to be a social worker, I wanted to be a chef. Because my dad, when he came from Haiti, he was a chef or sous chef at a country club. He used to always tell us he used to make $3.23 an hour when he first came to the US to help us understand how far he's come, right? So in some way, some shape, some form, like that spirit of hospitality and hosting people and cooking and all that always has been a part of my life. And that's what I wanted to pursue. And when I realized like dad said no, I was like, okay, well, I can do social work and I can figure that out and I can still help people in this way. I just didn't feel like that was the thing. So I was like, I'd rather wash dishes than do anything else. I literally got a job at Smashburger. Within 6 months, I got promoted. And then within 2 months, I was a regional store manager. I opened up 7 stores with them because I was doing the thing that I was passionate about, right? I was
Which
hosting.
is hospitality.
Yeah, because that was like the spirit of home for me. The spirit of home is like hospitality, serving people, right? Hosting, all of that is still.
It's also, and it's also following that internal navigator, right? Because some people would look at it and be like, you had all these other opportunities, but you know what home feels like. Tell me about that. So we opening up a ton of smash burgers under your leadership. Love that. And what's next?
Yeah, what's next is I realized I think I still need some more formal education. I think I'm ready to go back now. So I went back, I got my degree, this time in psychology. Because I think being in the trenches with people and hearing different stories, I think being at Smashburger allowed me the opportunity not to just work in the back, but also work the floor and listen to people's stories and understand what they're navigating. And that really made me curious about studying psychology, understanding not just the mind, but people's experiences. So I started studying psychology. I got my degree in 2017. Fast forward. Thank you. And have been super passionate, always passionate about like men in particular, men's mental health and their wellness. And have been working in spaces that prioritize community and wellness. So
Nice.
Yeah.
Tell me more about these spaces. Before you do that, I just want to highlight that there is no job too small. Do you understand what I mean? Because both you making the decision, and this is a pack that feels like home daily, right? You not only get to stretch the muscle of hospitality and creating a home in these franchises just for the guests that are in there, but also saying to yourself that I want to maximize this. I'm also going to go to school so I can have the formal education as well. You know what I mean? I feel like in our society, we don't see things as holistically as we need to. Because some people will be coming in and be like, oh, where's the managers? And you like, yeah, there's a complaint here, but there's something deeper here. You know what I mean? And they don't expect that. They don't expect that from our community. They don't expect that from our Black men. And I love that. You're like a Swiss Army knife. I love that. So tell me about these spaces that you enter and you bring this level of expertise.
yeah, so when I first graduated college, my first formal job that I got was an offer to be a youth counselor in the city of Chicago. And working with Black and brown boys, ages 16 to 24, like just creating space for them to like share their experiences. A lot of these brothers are kids that had seen their homies get shot and murdered in plain sight. Folks that were living through complex trauma and navigating that. And so just creating spaces where they could like be honest about it and find community, that was what I was called to.
How was it? Picking up from New Jersey and going to Chicago.
It was so exciting. Oh my gosh. It was thrilling because I always felt like I was called to more than just my community, but actually doing the work and being in the trenches and doing the thing that I knew I was called to do, like doing purpose. There's nothing like it.
Not purpose.
Yeah.
Then, yes, doing purpose. I don't think that, whoa, I just feel like that is heavy. Because I think we always think like, what is my purpose? And it's like, people think it's a statement versus an activity. So doing purpose was transitional.
Pastor earlier, and I think my pastor in this season is Dr. Darius Daniels. In one of the sermons that he preached about a month or so ago, he said, callings don't change, but roles do. Yeah, like my calling is to create spaces where Black men and brown men primarily can heal, can come together, can connect, can convene, can be cared for. Like that's my calling. Where I do that work, how that shows up looks differently, right? So with Black Men in Tech, I am the head of community. I lead membership where I facilitate space where Black men and brown boys can come together, can find mentorship, can find community, but can also upskill, right? At church, I serve and support local small groups that are, again, creating that same space. So like the calling is the same, but the role and responsibility that I have is different.
I love that.
Yeah.
I really, it's so crazy.
Thank you.
Like, it brings me back to this experience of adversity, right? In our younger years. And over time, I have learned that God states us for a reason. Because I think when we think of Christianity, we think of our relationship with God, you keep thinking it's supposed to be this pure, clean experience. And that's why people and man likes to keep restrictions and regulations around the church. But I feel like hearing these stories make me feel that purity actually lives in this thing. It does. Because then you weren't stayed by that experience. It opened up another eye for you not only to realize your home wasn't the home you thought it was, but also your calling was to create. Because everywhere you've gone, you've created spaces and flowers for Black men to exist. And without that stain, you wouldn't even realize that your home is not the home you thought it was. Oh my gosh, that's so amazing.
And I think what I learned along the journey was that, like, I am home. Like, wherever I am, God is. And wherever I am, like, the space that I'm called to cultivate and curate is ever changing.
Yes, I love that. I love how not only your personal experiences, but your professional experiences had that similar feel of not only creating a home, but positioning you in the place that you are the architect of that. See, you went in to wash the dishes. They said, no, I need you to be the manager. And they said, now I need you to be a regional manager. Do you see what I mean? That sometimes, and that's why I joke about this with the side note. I joke about it all the time that when it comes to my podcast, I'm very overfared. I want everything to be great. And I have found in the 3-4 years now with this podcast that every time I am over-prepared, anxious about anything, I truly see God cracking. Like, looking at me like, truly cracking up because I'm a dream and I dream big. And I know we sit there and be like, oh, poor little fool. Poor little fool don't know what I have.
She thinks she knows.
She thinks she knows because we think we go. And I love this conversation because it brings everything back to center. That focus on the fully. Focus, and it's crazy that I tell my daughters all the time. Focus on the details. God knows the direction.
That's some deep.
All the time. Because I have 2 daughters that are very different. And even my friends. Because I feel like everybody's always trying, we're chasing relationships, we're chasing happiness, we're chasing wholeness. And I'm always like, you have no idea the direction. Nor focus on the details. And you know what those details are? Within you. What motivates your actions? Those are the details you need to focus on to create good internally. Because we can't want a partner or be in a relation or even be a part of a community unless you know your phone. So tell me how you got to the podcast.
We're not ready for that just yet.
See, listen, we ready for it. How did you come to podcast? How did you say, I need this conversation to be rolling?
Yeah. So in 2020, I ended a 5-year-long relationship. And I already talked about like not feeling safe at home. It was a relationship that was a bit contentious towards the end. And I knew that I needed to do some work to heal. And I wanted to heal in isolation, alone, by myself, without really having to answer to people. Like, where you at? What you doing? Like, I just needed space and time. And I'll never forget, it was June 6th of 2022. So like a couple months before that. I got a call from my mentor. And She had just landed home where she was, Savannah, Georgia. Dr. Batiste Barry, she just landed her home, and she called and was like, "Baby, you're on my heart. I can feel you. What's going on?" I just broke down, and I told her what I was navigating, what I was feeling. And she said, "Why don't you just go home?" So mind you, at the time I was living about 10 or 12 minutes from my childhood home. And I was like, I don't want to do that. And I don't think I had all the reasons why. After 30, going back home, like, I don't want to humble myself.
I want to keep moving forward.
Yeah, for sure. What does it look like? What do I look like going back home? And she was like, "Baby, just call the daddy and ask him if you can come back home." And I did, and he said, yeah. And so 4 months later, I came back home. And the podcast is like chronicling that journey, what it looked like to humble myself and come back home to heal, one. But also what I discovered along the journey. I discovered about me, what I discovered about people, what I discovered about life, about God, relationships too, right? About grief, about, giving myself permission to grieve, not just someone who had passed, but a relationship.
And giving yourself the grace to grieve expectation. Right? I think as human beings, we subconsciously build these expectations for the people around us, who we love, that we're like, oh, this will happen and that will happen. Then it doesn't. And it doesn't necessarily have to be in totality the ending of a relationship, but we kind of see those expectations start to dwindle. And taking space to grieve those expectations. How was that, dude? That is,
Because I feel like in this society where statistically there are more people living with their parents in their 30s now than ever before.
So that's what made me say, I want to talk about, I was running into people that was like, oh my God, like, that's my experience. Or I did that too. Or like, then I've been hiding for the last 6 months because this is what I've been doing. Like, and I wanted to create space where we could talk a bit more openly about what we were navigating as 30-something-year-olds that were coming back home, whether after like a breakup or an illness or babies, or like your mom or your dad had ill, right? And you come back home, or you got a diagnosis, and you more support. So like, talking about that with people has been really interesting. So
I love, because the path back home is not narrow.
it's not where you're.
It's not linear, but when we see statistics, right? When we see the headlines, and there were people in their 30s with their parents than them before, I think it becomes a joke. It becomes a joke. It becomes this point of shame and contention, when in all things there was nuance. And I think personally, when I see those statistics, again, I don't know, it's also so why am I home for me? But also me creating a home with my husband. I know it since I was 18, like you, and it when I read that, it made me weep for my generation. It made me weep for millennials, because we are coming in our society to this place of consciousness about our wellness and our well-being. And if the numbers is, I work in technology, I'm on my data. If the numbers are saying there is a large portion of us returning home, it's because a large portion of us are not well.
Sure.
And we are seeking out that level of wellness to be whole, find a home internally, to then thrive, right? Like, everything is not, there are the benchmarks. It's more about the wellness. So I love this. Tell us more about the podcast.
Yeah. So the podcast kind of got birthed from a few different reasons and things, but there's a piece of research that I read a few years back. The Surgeon General of the United States, the 19th and 21st, I believe his name is Dr. Marty. He put out an article stating that there's like a global epidemic of loneliness. Loneliness is really affecting communities nationwide, right? And so I really felt called to create a space where, we could talk about that loneliness that we're experiencing and talk about what we're doing to heal that. Talk about what we're doing to come together and heal well.
So it's a podcast where you come together, so you talk about how people has made their way back home.
People made their way back home. People that are looking for an answer, looking for a way back home. Right? It's not a one size fits all, but like
But home means for them, right? Because I feel like we define culture in so many different ways. There's a hole within ourselves that we need to kind of first the foundation as we navigate the world. Then there's the homes that we create and the spaces that we occupy. And then there is the home that you run to. So talk to me about like the variations in the conversations and what the audience can expect when they listen to your podcast.
Yeah, I think the audience can expect a lot. I have a lot of guests that have been with me through my journey home. So you'll hear a lot of different stories about me and who I've been and how people have related to me. But you'll also hear spiritual leaders, coaches, therapists talk about what home means, what healing means, what it looks like to different people. So there's something for everyone.
Thank you. So I love that. And I love that it's not linear. And I love that, like you said, you had a accredited professional and you yourself studied psychology. Also in our society, you have a lot of talking heads with little experience, but a lot of voice.
Little.
So I'm glad to see that you didn't need to work, but you won't create space.
Yeah, thank you.
This has been such an amazing session. I could go on for days today. Thank you so much for being on the podcast. If I let you go. Here on the podcast, we believe that music is the intro we make, rapist we are as human beings. Music helps us through our challenging times to amplify our highlight. So every week, my guest, we vibe on this week. So tell me, what's in the queue?
What's in the queue? A lot of Afro beats.
Hey,
I can't the bruise. But a lot of Afro beats. There's a Christian group called the Detroit Collective that I've been vibing to. There's a particular song called What a Friend We Have that I've been like having. And then what else? I think that's it. Yeah.
Nice. I love those two intersections. People always understand there is a spiritual component to our discussion. But I'm also like, we are human. I don't know where in our society this belief that spirituality and Christianity means perfection came from. But we are human beings and we are layered. So I'm definitely listening to Kurt Franklin and a little spice. And I'm talking reggae spice. Listen, I could do both. I'm listening to Little Maverick City, a little smoking, but I'm also definitely listening to Jay-Z. Thank you so much. I love this conversation. We continue to be on this conversation. Thank you so much. This was such a treat. Thank you.